Welcome, everyone. My name is Shireen Khosropur. I'm a psychology professor at Austin Community College, and I'm also the director of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at Austin Community College. And on behalf of myself and my colleague, Leila Toragi, I want to welcome you to this installment in our Peace and Relationship series. We're not going to wait too long to get started. We have a very an amazing program today. So we want to jump right in. I'll briefly introduce our presenter and then turn it over to him promptly. David Cooley is started working with restorative relationship conversation models, or maybe he founded it. But in any case, his work fits beautifully with the model of conflict transformation that we use at Austin Community College. If any of you is interested in learning more about conflict transformation, please contact me or Leila. We have a degree program in it as well. Conflict transformation is different from conflict resolution in that conflict resolution is, the goal is to stop the conflict, which is not a bad thing. But conflict transformation's model is to use the energy that conflict creates and create something better, get down deeper into some potentially structural issues, some power imbalances, and build a stronger relationship, not merely stop that particular conflict from occurring. So I'm going to turn it over to David to say a little bit about himself and introduce today's topic. We are also, unlike every other time, if you have joined us before, we are asking people to mute their audio and video per David's request. And yes, thank you. And I will also mute mine as soon as David, I hand the baton over to David.
All right. Thank you so much, Shireen. It's really good to be here. As Shireen said, my name is David Cooley. I'm the founder of the Restorative Relationship Conversation model. This is based on years of experience in the restorative justice field. And so after leaving that field, I realized that I wanted to create a model that could be applicable for romantic and intimate relationships, which can also include familial or friends. I have had some business associates want to work with me as well, but it's a very sort of one-on-one or two-on-two kind of very small group model. And so what we're going to see here today is a real session with a couple of clients that have agreed to have their process observed very generously. And so we're going to meet Adam and Kelly in just a moment. But they've had a session with me already, and this is part of the model, is that you stagger the process. And so when clients initially reach out to me and ask to have this kind of process, what we do is we first have an hour-long session where I share exactly what the model looks like, what they can expect, and then we really focus on what they want to work on in the context of the session that follows. And so this is that session that follows, which is really the restorative relationship conversation process. And so they've got their homework for them, which we'll see in just a moment. I've asked them to talk about what their intentions and goals are for this process. We'll also just do a little recap because our last session happened several weeks ago. So we want to dust off the cobwebs of what it is that we zeroed in on in terms of what we're going to focus on today. And then we'll do just a brief hearing of what their intentions are. And then we're going to jump right into the process. We've got about 2 hours scheduled for that. The time can typically go pretty quickly. Sometimes we wrap up sooner. Sometimes it goes a hair over. My intention after the process is done with Adam and Kelly is to cut them loose. And then for anyone that still is around and interested, do a little Q&A. So that's sort of the bare bones description of what you're about to see now. So I'd love to jump in and invite Adam and Kelly to the forefront. And I'm really curious to hear what things have been like for you all since our first session. Again, it was several weeks ago. But sometimes the conversation can sort of jar things loose or create new insights or reflections. So I'm really curious, what was that process like for you all? And yeah, how are you doing today?
You first? Okay, fine.
Yeah, so the initial conversation, I think it felt for me very well. I felt at ease and I felt relieved. I remember that, responding to your email, you know, to sort of come on and explore something. Everything rose to the surface, and I'd typically analysed and diagnosed what was going on, and, you know, was trying to pick it apart, and that wasn't going so well. So after speaking in our first session, particularly listening to Adam saying how it was for him when, you know, I went from like 0 to 100 with my volume, my aggression, my sort of flares is what I could feel. It was difficult to hear. Like, I've heard that before, but I really knew, I really could hear what it was like for him. Like that for me, when I was listening to him speak to you, it was like he was frightened. And it was, we've been together 20 years, so we've grown a lot, but, and I've heard, and we've been through some processes over the years, but I don't know why, it just really felt like so clear. Oh, we're one of those couples that I'm the loud one, I'm the angry one, even though I'd not really accepted that before. I kind of accepted it, it was like, yeah, but you, it was like a yeah, but you thing. I just really heard that Adam was just like not okay with it. And I just felt really compassionate about, oh, we're just really different people in the way we communicate. And I understood that was causing a lot of pain. And for myself, I got that I really must trust when I feel that there's something under the surface. I remember saying that on our conversation, like, there's just something here and I just don't like it. I just had a lot of compassion for myself. So I just thought that is real, like that. I'm actually living with that every single day. And I can't blame Adam for that. And I want help. I was part of why I respond is I'm like, I want to help to, you know, do the archaeological brush on this and have a look at what's going on. So yeah, for me, it was really, really revealing, and it's been a very, very busy in my self-awareness since. So yeah, I was really looking forward to today to I'll shut up now.
No.
Thank you, Kelly.
But for me, I suppose it was, I think we touched on that sometimes I feel a bit more logical or less emotional. So for me, after the session, I was aware of processing, you know, we talked about the intensity levels. And I was able to sit with that for a while and actually think, well, you know, it's just intensity. That doesn't necessarily have to have anything behind it. It's just whether it's volume or whatever. So just being able to sit with that was quite reflective. It was quite interesting, because we had a heated discussion actually where we're sitting now, and then we brought that in, didn't we? And we said about the intensity, which was it acted as a almost an anchor to say, hang on, we talked about this. So it dropped us out of that emotional state quite quickly, and we were both able to, well, I certainly speak for myself, I was able to think, well, we just got to an intense level, but it wasn't necessarily, didn't mean more than we just got to that level. So it was quite healthy. So yeah, that was quite interesting. So I'm looking forward to today and seeing where we can get to.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like there's actually been a lot of movement in terms of the self-reflection and change. It sounds like you're already integrating the pieces that we talked about in that initial session.
Yeah.
And so that's great. And it sounds like it's created a good precedent for being enthusiastic about this particular session, which is awesome as well.
Can I add something else, David?
For sure.
It just, yeah, feels really pressing. So, so I don't remember the terminology, and, you know, you talked about the brain and what happens in the body and stuff in our first session, you know, you were laying that out. That was helpful to me But I remember after the session feeling, I felt I had like I'm always going to be like this. Like I felt a bit, I'm always going to be like this. Like I'm not going to be able to sort that nervous system thing out, because I've tried, you know, I've been doing so many years of work on that because of the anger issues. But I actually, talking about what you said, like I still feel to be heard, I have to kind of shut people down. Like I feel like I have to go, enough now. Like, and it's, I try being graceful and I try being feminine. I try all those things, but I have been more forceful in some of my directional language, which I still don't think is very comfortable for people. And it's been hard for me, but it feels like I'm really connected in my body to what's going on. And I sought out an old social worker friend last week, and I did really deep inner child work with her. Like I was able to get to places that I never imagined I would have revisited, like real memories. So yeah, I just felt like that was yeah, just in case I get emotional today, it feels like there's a lot of forgiveness and compassion for myself, and also that I don't want to have to communicate like that to be heard, you know, and to just to be listened to, like to really be gotten. So yeah, just wanted to add that bit.
I'm really glad you're at naming that, and that feels really important. And that actually is going to give me a good segue into talking about some of the pieces of this process, specifically in the context of what you all named you're wanting to focus on. And so for me, as I hear you talk, I can even, it looks like you're even starting to feel emotion as you're naming that, right? And so what I want to invite is an acceptance of whatever you're experiencing is welcome. Whatever parts come to the surface are welcome. I don't want you to feel like you have to shut any part of yourself off. And again, this is not about eliminating intensity. It's about communicating in a way that's clean and can be heard by your partner, heard and received. And so that's one thing that can actually be pretty revolutionary for a lot of couples, is that intensity emotionally in and of itself is not problematic. And we have to be allowed to be intense in our emotional expression if that's something that's authentic to us as individuals. What we can't do is then use that intensity to lose control of the way that we communicate. We can't shame, blame, or attack the other person, make them responsible for our internal experience. We can say, what you're doing is triggering me and it has an impact, and I want you to see that, but there's actually nothing wrong with how you're being if you're able to keep that sort of self-possession in terms of ownership of, this is mine, this is my stuff to work on. It's getting activated because of what you're doing. Can now we negotiate what works for both of us?
Yeah.
But it's really important to separate, not to just link intensity with problem. Right? It's not a problem that someone's intense. If you've had trauma and been exposed to psychological, emotional, or physical abuse, especially the kind where your parents were loud and intense, and you experienced that abuse in the context of that loud and intense tone, then it can be very triggering for you to have a partner get loud and intense. And it can take you back to a place where you're starting to relive some of that trauma. And it can be very difficult to then feel safe in that context. And yet, sort of having conceptually the idea that your intensity is not a problem in and of itself. It's the way that you communicate and ask for what you need that's really what's most important. And having both people have that awareness and an agreement, like, okay, we're going to learn how to create a container for your experience so you don't feel like you have to escalate to get your needs met. But we're also not going to pathologize your emotional intensity. Because part of what we talked about in that last session was that difference that you named, right? Is that, Adam, you tend to be very logical. A lot of that precedent was set in your childhood with your parents, right? Some of that can even be generational, where it's sort of in generations past, the predominance of rational thought has sort of had more leeway, more sort of validity when compared to emotion. I think that's starting to change slowly, but it's still an imbalance. And so what we want to do is not have rational dominant or emotional intensity dominant. but both can have their place and see them as gifts.
Yeah.
But how do we also allow the other person to have their experience without, again, pathologizing it? One of the goals, we're about to hear your goals in just a moment, but one of the goals of the process in general is how to use conflict to create more intimacy, right? We're talking about what's the difference between conflict resolution and transformation. So for me, the big difference is, how do you use conflict to generate more intimacy, not less, not fall into disconnection?
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is give a definition of intimacy that for me has been very helpful in the context of this work. And it's essentially the willingness and capability to share and hold space for each other's lived experience without trying to change it or fix it. Right? And so that means, what is your partner experiencing? Can we allow it? Can we hold space for it without trying to make it stop, trying to make it different, to assuage our own discomfort? So a lot of that's what's happening for us. If our nervous system is getting activated because their nervous system is getting activated, we can try to shut them down just so that we're not feeling the discomfort of our own agitation. And that's something we have to learn how to recognize and sort of work with, so that it's not hijacking our conversations when we are triggered. So there's a lot of self-awareness there. So again, I'll keep referencing that intention over and over again, and that's built into the structure of what we're going to do today. The reflective listening and speaking that you're going to be doing with each other creates a structure that's very rigid, so that you have that safety to express yourself, no matter what that needs to look like, as long as the language stays within the bounds that I've named. No shame, no blame, no attack. You can be how you need to be, and the partner's going to hear it, reflect it back, and make sure that they're saying it right, or in a way that can be received. Right? And so that creates that space for each other's lived experience to step into the space, and you all get to hear and potentially see each other in a new way. Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Excellent. So I would love to start with you, Adam, and hear your intentions and goals for this process.
Well, my intentions and goals, I have done my homework, so it is here. But hearing what you sort of said there, sort of trumps what I was going to say. So, you know, I think my intention will be much more around what you said about having someone hear me, and hearing the person I'm talking to, and have that received, in terms of what you mentioned. And the not fixing really resonates with me, because I go very quickly to conversations with, I can fix this, or this should be a different way, or this person, Kelly, should be acting differently. So my intention will be to learn a more effective way of communicating, a more intimate way of communicating, and have Kelly feel that she's heard, and feel that there's more compassion and love from me in that vessel that's the conversation, or the communication piece. Something like that.
Lovely.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Kelly, what's it like to hear Adam say that?
Really lovely. It's really comforting. Probably more just feeling how soft he feels when he's saying it, because things just feel so rigid and spiky so much of the time. And I know he's just so kind, but when you've been together a long time and you've kind of undone some patterns, and then they kind of creep back in, or they're a bit different, you can just end up feeling tired, really tired, because we have loads of fun and we do things together, and we try and unravel stuff like that. Gives us a I think, a really great sense of humor and some longevity. But like to just hear someone say that they want to listen to you and understand just feels really lovely.
What's the
And I
emotion?
don't feel like I need to like attack, you know, I don't feel like I need to keep working on stuff to sort it out. You know, it's like, yeah.
What was the
I think
emotion?
sorry, I
no,
was going to say that the other thing that comes up is something around patience for me, because I want our conversations to be quicker, shorter, more to the point, and I get that's not very caring. You know, that's just like I'm communicating in work, really, and even in work that doesn't work as well as it could work by just making everything shorter. So, you know, I kind of already thinking that what it must be like to have everything shortened. You know, you obviously don't feel heard if I'm constantly going, can you just shorten what you want to say? So,
especially if there's a narrative about what emotionality is or the way that people should be communicating, right? And some of that narrative about this should be more efficient and emotions aren't efficient and I can't control an emotional response from someone else. It means you have to surrender, you have to let go, you have to slow down, right? And so the willingness and capacity to hold space for someone else's process means a lot of surrender, right? And patience is a sort of the first step into that surrender. Okay, I'm stepping into this container with you. I have to modulate my own, this is not going fast enough. And so you're going to be looking at that potentially as this process happens. What are the things within you that keep you from staying present to Kelly's experience? You're going to have to monitor those, grapple with them, breathe through them, have their place, but also keep staying present. It's a new skill set.
Yeah, I'm already thinking how hard it is.
Let's think about what an awesome challenge it is.
Yeah.
Like it's going to give you exactly what you intended, what you just said you wanted. This is what you'll need to be able to work on in order to manifest that intention that you just named. What you just saw in Kelly, the response, it's really lovely to hear him say these things. This is one of the reasons why I have people name their intentions and goals for the process, because it really sets a powerful precedent for the process itself for both people.
Yeah.
Kelly, I'm just curious about the emotion that you were feeling when you were speaking. Do you remember the emotion itself?
It's a bit strange. It feels sad. I feel really sad because well, because it's so tiring to just be, it's just so tiring. That's what it feels like. It just feels so tiring. And you can, when I think about like all the conflict and stuff and work and different issues, just say with men and women, just to make it simple. Like I've just known for so long, it doesn't need to be like that. Like, yes, I waffle, I go on too long. Like I could create a list of all the things that are just ineffective and cause delays and eventually you do. I did shut up, not in our relationship, but I have tried to channel myself. I tried all these different ways to try and make myself like acceptable, but I have done that quite well, but it's spilled out into so many other areas. You know, I've been so angry And you know, in our first session, I told you about the years of I've done nonviolent communication. I've done everything in the book to try and be like, no, I'm wrong. And I definitely, it is a dynamic. I believe that in everything, but it is just like, yeah, I just feel sad because I've just been so confused for so long.
And so what I want to highlight here, as you start to see a partner behave differently, potentially for the first time, this can bring up a lot of negative feelings. It can bring up a lot of reflection of, oh my God, it's been like this for so long. There's been so much pain accumulated here. There can be anger, there can be sadness, there can be disbelief. I don't trust you. I don't actually think you're going to do this. Like it can, when you start to see a partner do something new, we have to be ready for this sort of whiplash of the lived accumulation of time together, and not see that as a bad thing. It actually means you're safe enough in the space to start feeling what's real. And sort of seeing a partner do something new actually makes you feel safe enough to start having these feelings come to the surface, which is, again, a good thing, a positive thing, but it can be really uncomfortable. And it can sometimes be jarring to the other person. So I'm here, I'm making the effort. You should be happy that we're moving or learning something new or moving to something new. And so it's important to keep holding space for yourself and for your partner as you step into something new. So that's why I'm wanting to name your experience, because it's going to be an important part of this process as you continue to change patterns.
Yeah, I'm thank you for explaining. And I'm just really I'm just really aware of yeah, like that. I don't feel angry in this moment, but just it's like, I mean, basically like it's like an injustice without being all, because I just go, when, because if you're a feeler, you end up doing so much work because other people are not feeling, you know, and you think it's you all the time. You think there's something wrong with you, so you just constantly like, oh, it's me.
Yeah, for sure. For the sake of time, I want to move forward, and I'd love to hear your intentions and goals for this.
Yeah, my main intention was like to understand where I was in the way of intimacy, like more intimacy, because I always see like such lovely breakthroughs in us. I'm like, why do I keep like this analytical hacking, dissecting thing, like this on guardness? That was like, so there's two things for me, like really just softening into like the intimacy and where am I, and then also hopefully to bring some softness and release or relief to the dissecting and diagnosing, you know, the that and like goals, I was just like, oh, just less of that real flary, like less intense, less intensity, like the bad intensity, because I am aware that I can project and do stuff, and just more of this rather than so yeah.
Adam, what's that like to hear?
Yeah, I understand. I can understand that in terms of what your intention is, and I think I understand it. I think I understand where you're coming from. I will try to be completely genuine in these conversations. So part of that, again, some of the language, I just go, I don't understand that, or where you're coming from. So there's a feeling of what comes up straight away is, if I don't understand, how can I help? And then you feel a bit helpless, and then there's either I switch off or I sort of go, well, you know, this isn't going to work because I don't understand the process. So I'm just going to trust in what you're gonna show us.
Perfect. You both are giving me so much already like in the naming of the intentions and in the reactions that you're having to each other's intentions and goals is already giving me a lot to set a template for what we're going to be doing. And so in that case, what you're naming there, what I want first from you, and again, going back to our definition of intimacy, my goal for both of you is to first hear each other. And so first you're reflecting back. What I'm hearing you say is this. After you've gotten the reflection right, then you have the opportunity to ask questions. Right. And so for Adam, it's going to be really imperative based on what you just named to be able to ask questions. Often what we do is when we don't understand something is we project. We project our own insecurities, we project our own frustrations, we project our own fears and our assumptions about what the other person means. We fill in the blanks that we don't understand. And we don't start with a reflection. We don't say, this is what I'm hearing you say. We just launch right into our response. And when it's conflict, it's typically reactive. So in this case, what we're doing is we're slowing ourselves down with a very specific protocol. And this is something that hopefully you'll be able to integrate into your conversations on a personal level. But it's really this first piece of, did I even hear you? You want to make sure you both feel like you're saying enough of the same thing before you even start talking about that thing. You don't want to start launching into an analysis or a discussion about something that you might not even be understanding each other about. That's where that reflection is so important. And giving your partner consent to move forward through that, okay, I feel like you feel like I'm hearing you. So you start with that. Then if you feel like, I don't know, there's words or language or expression in there that I don't understand, then you have the opportunity to, what did you mean by that? Can you help me understand this piece? And if there's certain words or language that are triggering for you that you're not going to be able to digest the meaning of what your partner's saying, you can explore together mutually, what's another way to say this so that your nervous system can actually integrate it. And so you might be finding new ways to express the same thing, but through different lexicons based on what your respective nervous system and personal history need, right? But that's something you mutually negotiate, not impose on each other. You should be saying it this way. No. We want, hey, would you mind reframing, exploring another way to say that? Or what if, could we look at it this way, right? It needs to be collaborative. Okay. Perfect. So let's jump in. And what I want to do is first ask, do you all have a specific conflict, be it money, parenting, scheduling, shared space, whatever it is? Do you have something specific that you would like to start with in terms of where we go? Or would you like to just talk about how you process conflict in general, and the specific issue may not be as relevant? For some couples, it can go either way, because we identified in our first session that you all didn't have a major rupture that you were necessarily trying to work through. This process is more focused on patterns of communication, right? And so that's something I'm naming for the observers, is sometimes people come to me and they've had a very clear rupture in the past that they want to work through, whereas others want a dynamic like this. And so we're focusing on a dynamic, we're focusing on patterns of communication, but I want to give you the choice to name a conflict that you'd like to work on in the context of this session, or just say, it's sort of the same pattern in all the conflicts.
I can go first.
Yeah.
When I first wrote back to David, it was, I don't remember my words, but it was kind of to do with money, roles, agreements, and stuff like that. So to like really name it to Dave, my choice would be to be, I'd love to talk about the structure around money, what I've been doing the last years, how we go forward, like how we can work together using both of our ways. But it really is about like the structure of our lives, lifestyle, and money. Is there anything else?
That's enough.
Okay,
If
yeah,
that's what you want, that'll be plenty.
yeah, yeah,
All right.
that's mine. That's my wish list.
Adam, how about for you?
I'm fine with that. Yeah,
Okay,
that's a
great.
good one. It's a good
Great.
one.
So it is. Money is typically a good one, a good
Yeah.
detonator for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, let's do that. We've got consent, so let's jump in there. So what I want to do is we're going to start with the speaker listener role. And so what I'd like is for you, Kelly, to start as the speaker. And when you speak, you all are going to be talking to each other. You're going to turn to each other and talk to each other, not to me.
Yeah.
Right. And what you're naming is sort of what's challenging about the money situation, what sort of brings what you feel like is bringing you into conflict around money or even talking about money. What we're trying to do is give Adam the opportunity to really understand what your experience is of the dynamic between the two of you when either talking or dealing with money. You want to stay aware of how much you're saying, because we're going to ask Adam to repeat, right? And so sometimes it's better to sort of offer a chunk, become aware of yourself and say, I think that's enough for now. I'm going to stop. And then we give Adam the chance to say in his own words, not verbatim, but in his own words, what I'm hearing you say is this, or what I'm hearing or what I'm understanding is this. And then he's going to sort of bullet point what he heard you say. Then he's going to ask, did I get everything? If he did, great. If he didn't, then you say, this piece I also named, this was important. I want this reflected back. And then Adam will say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is I missed this point, and he'll reflect it back to you again in his own words. Once you acknowledge that you feel heard, then, or that he's gotten everything, he's going to ask you, do you feel heard? And you'll say yes, if that's the case. Then, Adam, you have a chance to sort of ask any clarifying questions at that point. So when I heard you talk about X, Y, or Z, I wasn't sure what you meant, or it'd be helpful to hear you say more about, but it needs to be a question.
Okay.
Okay. And one more piece about the reflective sort of back to you, Kelly. Adam, what you're going to not be doing is adding any of your own sort of thoughts, justifications for your behavior, defensiveness, dismissal, explanations. It's really, you're just trying to give her back what you heard her say. That's extremely important. Extremely important. If you go off the rails, I'll stop you. And Kelly, if
Okay.
your language starts to get too activated or starts creeping into, not activated in the sense that you're getting emotional or intense, none of that will be a problem for me. But if you start to name, shame, or blame, or do any of those things that kind of break the rules of the MBC sort of guidelines that we agreed on in the last session, what I'll do is I'll say stop.
Great.
If you hear me say stop, I'll just ask that you stop, look at me, and I'll say, can we reframe that last bit? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Adam, one last piece for you of instructions is, we talked, I think, last time about the scale of 1 to 10, right? Sort of 1 being neutral, regulated, 10 being completely dysregulated. We talked about the importance of having an awareness of 1 to 5, right? What is our 1 to 5? Because past 5, we start getting into the danger zone where we're much more prone to fight or flight responses. If you feel yourself getting to the 5, I want you to look at me, raise your hand. Don't say anything, just raise your hand and look at me, and then I'll engage you and ask you what's going on and see what was problematic or triggering for you in what Kelly was saying. This is also going to help you start to learn how to articulate your own sense of triggers and escalation within your nervous system, and how to interrupt that in a way that's constructive and creative.
Okay.
As opposed to just keep going.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, great. So, Kelly, when you're ready, and I just want to make sure both of you are on camera. It looks like, Kelly, you're out of the frame. So you're going to have to be pretty intimate for this one.
I'd like to share some things around how I feel about our money situation. I feel at war. The way we structure our finances, I feel like there's two different people with ways that work for them individually, that when we try to come together, it just goes, it just gets really confusing and a bit warring.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you'd like to share that it feels like there's that there's a bit of a war going on when we come together with our different views of the way of money. Yeah.
I feel like I've proved I feel like I've always been really good with money, solid, independent, strong. Like feels like my belief about myself. And yet, since having Harris, that's over 10 years now, and not being so focused on ambition, drive, work, but more focused on family and nurturing and that, I feel like that screwed up my life, to be honest. I feel like that screwed up my chances of, being financially stable.
So I'm hearing that you believe that you were always really good with money, creating money, and then since having Harris, that screwed everything up a bit, really, in terms of. Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. You did it. I was afraid that you weren't going to ask if I got it all, but that was great. The first time I didn't say it because she only sort of made one point and you said it back. But I just want to make sure that you're checking in about, are you getting what she's saying? But so far, the chunks that you've been expressing are very manageable, very small. So it's hasn't been an issue yet.
Okay. I feel like I get the blame a lot for our finances. And it's, what's that word? It's very inconsistent. You're really supportive. You're like, look at the contribution you make to our family, Harris, etc. Like that feels true from you. But then our overall lack of financial thriving, when that penny drops, every so often with you, it really feels like the brunt of the blame is with me. Like, what am I doing? Get this sorted. And also, at the same time, it's like kind of like a double-edged sword, because you're the one that, even though you're super encouraging with my career and all the things I do, again, it goes, but I don't see coaches earning money. I don't see this. I don't see that. So there's this build up, pull down, build up, pull down.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is I didn't get it all. I'm feeling you feel that you're perhaps the brunt of our problems with money, and that I am not maybe congruent with how I communicate between us. Do you feel that sometimes I sort of pull the rug up from under you, and sometimes I'm supportive, and other times if I'm under pressure, perhaps I'm not? Is that right?
Yeah. I feel like it's more of the same. I feel like I feel like I get the blame. Like, it feels like to me like you have beliefs that you would be a beast, you know, you just have a better lifestyle. You'd be able to do the things you want to do, travel houses. That I am the weakest link.
Right.
I
Stop
pause
there.
this.
Stop there. Adam, what's it like to hear what she just said? Do you have any feeling or reaction to what she just said?
Yeah, I'm feeling that I want to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite tricky just to listen. I'm already in my brain. I'm already thinking this and that around those comments. So I'm already able to see how things could escalate very quickly from this conversation, really, because you know, again, I hear is what I'm feeling is I hear something, but there's no judgment around that. I'm just listening. I'm not making a judgment on what I'm hearing. It's quite hard to switch that bit off.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's correct. I don't know whether I'm not meant to be making a judgment. Am I meant to just be listening and just be being present to Kelly in terms of what she's saying? That if I am, that's the tricky bit. I'm already, my internal dialogue is already going, well, this.
Right. So there's two pieces here that you're working with. One is your own self-awareness. What's happening for you internally? Right. And so you're tracking what she's saying, and there's a part of you that's, especially if it's feeling challenged or blamed or attacked or called out in any way, there's going to be the part of you that wants to defend itself and just ready to pounce or sort of ready to respond, depending on what she's saying and how she's framing it. Then there's another part of you that it's just trying to hear and trying to listen. And that can be the really new part for a lot of partners, to just, you don't necessarily shut off your judgments or what you're hearing, but you want to be able to create some distance between them so that that's not all that's there. And so we're opening a space for allowing our partners to speak. And we're slowing down and putting a pause between our normal, okay, well, I'm just going to respond and we're going to go right into the back and forth game. Right. And so we're consciously and deliberately interrupting that preponderance for getting into a back and forth dialogue. Again, we're trying to validate our partner, and making sure they understand that we hear what they're saying. In this case, I stopped her because she started to say it was almost clean. She said, I get the sense that, or I feel that. And which is good in the sense that she's naming, it's through her perceptive sort of mechanism and not a full truth necessarily. She didn't say you do, but started to say, talk about your experience internally. Suppose what's going on for you. And so what we want to do is be really careful around that when you start naming another person's experience, because these are powerful things that come into us. But what we want to do is we want to be even more clear about the fact that this is not, I recognize that this isn't truth, but this is what is triggering for me. And so what we want to say is I'm having the story that, or I'm having the fear or concern that you believe that I'm not capable of money, or that I'm not sort of able to do finances in a way that are responsible. When you, Adam, as a partner, hear your other say, I have the story that, or I have the fear that, you want to really tune into that caveat and recognize that they're not saying you are, even though it can be tricky. It's easy to lose that caveat and hear everything that comes after as an indictment, right? But it's not. And so we have to hear that separation, and we have to recognize that they're naming the fear or naming the story because that's what's influencing them. And they're grappling with it. And they're ultimately want to get to the place where they explore that with you. Are you having that story? Is that real for you? That's ideally where you want to get. You want to get to the place where sort of you, Kelly, are able to ask, is this how you're holding it? And if you are holding this story and this is influencing your behavior, What do you need from me so that this changes? Does all that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm stopping you there because I want to give you that tool. I'm
Yeah.
having the story that, I'm having the fear that. So you're taking full ownership of the fact that you're making an assumption or projection about something that may or may not, it could be true. You may be right on the money, but we want to make sure that we're asking
Yeah.
and not just supposing, because that can be an easy and quick detonator for a partner, to assume you know what's going on for them.
Okay.
So it's clean if you say things that he's said or behaviors that he's done. That's external. You're naming what you've experienced. But when you start to suppose about his internal experience, then that's where you've really got to be careful and put that caveat in front of whatever's coming out of your mouth. Okay. So let's stop there. And can you remember what she said? I've talked a lot. Do you have a recollection of what she was saying?
Generally across everything,
Just in that last piece.
what I heard, no, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't.
Kelly, do you remember? Do you remember where you were going?
Yeah. Just a sec. Yeah, it was yeah, it was this might come out unclean again now. That it was about me feeling that I was the blame, that you couldn't lead the life you wanted or
Yeah.
have the lifestyle, and that I was to blame. So I was just like, yeah, just get like it's me being the blame, and then that spirals into other things, like you could have a better life, you could have your house, do all the things that I know are your dreams, but I'm the weakest link, is what I said.
Yeah. So what I heard you say was that you feel that it's almost like you're the weakest link, and without you, I would be able to pursue those financial goals that we talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel I heard you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I carry on or?
Is it? Yeah, let's do one or two more things in that piece.
I feel quite hopeless. I feel quite hopeless that I can impact anything other than working my ass off, make loads of money, and do what you need me to do, is what I feel. That's what I feel. I feel like in a bind because of I've got such belief and passion for what I want to do and to earn money in that way. It's like it's not allowed. That's how I feel. Like it's not allowed. I can't do it the way I want to anyway. That's how I feel.
Okay. So I heard that that you feel that that it's almost not allowed for you to do what you believe you can do, and that all you should really be doing is just working and earning.
Yeah.
So you just want to verify that you got everything that she said.
Yeah. Was that everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And but I feel in general, I'm in general in our life, I'm trying to use my strengths in finances, because the way I could do it would help me like enable myself, because I know how to do it. But then when I want to like partner with you in that, engage with you in that, that's all too much. It's really over the top. You know, what I want to bring, like the budgeting or the minutiae detail, it's still like then that's too much. But that actually would enable me. The way I want to do it would enable me to be much more of a contribution. But I'm wanting to partner with you, and I haven't got a partner in it unless I'm working my ass off doing it that way, is how I feel.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, you know, that you feel that the way that you would like to contribute in terms of budgeting, the small stuff, I'm not really letting you. Is that right? Or you don't feel able to contribute like that?
Yeah.
Is that right?
The last bit, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Was there anything
So-
that he needed to modify then that he missed from the first part?
What's going on for me is I'm really trying hard not to make it all okay. That's what's going on for me.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, what's going on for me is I just feel like I want to over explain and just say it's fine, it's okay, it's okay.
You mean in this moment?
Yeah.
Like you want to take back sort of,
Yeah, I want to go. Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm just like, oh, I'm doing it again. You know, I've made a mess of it, and
excellent.
you know, I'm messing up basically. So I literally can feel as I can see and hear you, you know, trying to understand it. I really want to take it back. I really want to go off. You know, I fuck things up. You know.
What are you feeling? What's the story? Like, why are you feeling that way? I really want to understand that experience for you right now.
Just the level of like, I really want to connect on stuff, and I really want to have agreement and like feel a sense of achievement together, but it's like I'm so annoying. Like, I am annoying. The way I want to do things is so annoying. So I do see how you try to meet me, and that just feels like a lot of work for you.
How we try to meet you?
When you try, yeah, like, so I'm watching you, and you don't look angry, but it just feels, what I'm sensing is that it's just so tiring for him. So then I feel like the story I'm telling myself is that it's so tiring for him, and I just want to clean it up.
Excellent. So what I'd like for you to do is take a breath and really feel into what you've named really well. You've named your experience. You've named, I have this fear, or two fears even. The fear that I'm messing this up, that this is on me, this is my fault, I'm doing it wrong. And that he's frustrated, burdened, whatever it is. Really feel into it and feel the way that becomes this obstacle to allowing this process to play out.
Right.
Don't try to, she's great.
Okay.
She's great. Let her head. And this is part of that disengaging, that fix it or change it. She's having her experience. We really want her to have it, because this is part of the obstacle. This is how you all will be able to do what you're saying you want.
Okay.
Is to really allow the feelings and stories that come up. There's a past that has created this pattern. This doesn't come from nothing.
Mm.
And we internalize these messages about our partners and ourselves that become profound obstacles to being able to say what's true for us. So really just be present with her without doing anything. Just really see her feel. and notice what comes up for you. And just remember, it's okay. Nothing's wrong. How are you feeling now, Kelly?
Just that feeling,
Mhm.
just putting it all back in and trying to sort it out.
Yeah. Can you say where on the scale of 1 to 10 it is for you?
Just then, because as well, I feel like I know enough, so I should be able to spot this stuff. But it's like I want to connect. I can see him there, and he's wanting to listen. But literally, I could literally was in slow motion. I wanted to just take it back and run away.
And so this is very new. This is potentially a new experience to have him just here, not doing anything. In the sense of not trying to fix or change, but really be with you in your feeling.
And I don't want to hurt him when I say things. I don't want to hurt him. I want to take responsibility, but I also want to say I'm really good at this. I'm really good. I'm so good at I love figuring things out and growing things, and I was always so good at it. I was always so good. And I just feel like I just reduce myself to putting up with being blamed. What I've done is be the most important job in the world. The most important job in the world.
Okay, I want you to look at me for a moment, Kelly. Take some deep breaths. And as much as you can, say to yourself, it's okay. The intensity of what you're feeling is not a problem. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now, even though it's uncomfortable and overwhelming. But take your time. There's no pressure. Nothing's actually happening right now. We're not trying to get anywhere specific. We're just trying to be with what's coming up and really create a legitimate space for it. And so as I have you regulate, it's not that I want your pain to go away. What I don't want is for you to fuse with the story, right? The story, I'm worthless, or I can't do this, or whatever it is. But I want the pain to be there and the story, but there's a little more space so that you can feel yourself as an adult now in this moment and relate to all of it and allow it.
I just feel like frustrated. I'm just so good at this stuff, and I'm like, it hasn't been working, and then it causes all these problems, and I'm like my mouth can't work, or when it does work, it's not healthy or kind.
So in this case, in this context, what I want your nervous system to feel is that what you're experiencing is not causing a problem. It's not problematic. That can be hard to believe, potentially given your context and your personal history, even the dynamic between the two of you. But this is what I'm saying. The container between the two of you has to be strong enough and safe enough for you to start processing. Because what I'm seeing is trauma come out. Really old stories seem to be coming to the surface. Some really intense pain. I don't want that to be squashed or repressed, because it seems like a lot of that process of trying to not have your experience is just creating more interference for you all to do your thing. And so this is sort of a unique opportunity for both of you to learn how to hold your experience. You're both holding each other. It's not just you have to get it together. How do you as a couple create space where you're safe to be okay as you are?
Mm.
Right. And so that's a unique challenge for Adam. Right.
Mm.
What were you feeling as you were observing her be upset?
I was trying to figure out why there was the upset. I was trying to figure out the level. I was trying to figure out why there was that level of upset when what I heard. So when I repeated back to you, in my world, there wasn't the level of upset attached to it. So I was trying to go, what else is there? Because I didn't hear I didn't hear this thing that would make me upset, which was, so I was quite, so I was a bit lost.
Perfect. What else in terms of, like, besides feeling lost and not understanding sort of how she got to where she got, was there anything else that you were feeling as you saw her upset?
I was feeling that I obviously wanted to make some statements that would have you perhaps be incorrect in what you were saying, and then that hopefully would stop you being upset.
Exactly. Can you give me an example of one of those statements?
Well, you know, I think you said, you know, doing the most important job in the world, or and I wanted to say, of course, you know, that's never ever been in question, and that you've always been good at this stuff. Of course, it's never been in question. So, you know, I wanted to sort of have you go, well, what you're feeling wasn't logical, wasn't, you know, I wanted to make her wrong, really, for making those statements when they weren't, in my world, they're not real, they're not correct.
And I'm imagining some of that too, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining some of that wanting to make her wrong is so that she doesn't feel upset.
Yeah, of course. You know, we talked before, I get very uncomfortable when you just, when you, what was coming up for me was, you're crying, this is being recorded, there's people on the call, how do we look? Perfect. Straight away. And, you know, I know we had that conversation today. Kel was having an emotional conversation with one of her friends in a cafe, and I was, can you bring the volume down, please? You know, and no one in the rest cafe knew that we're together, but I still felt very uncomfortable.
And we talked about this in this initial session, right? That socialization process that you experienced made emotions very problematic.
Yeah.
In the sense that, what does that mean for how we're seen socially? Yeah. What is proper? What is norms? You know, what is the normal behavior or appropriate behavior for people, especially in a social context? So I really appreciate the honesty that you're bringing to the table now. It's highlighting something very important in this dynamic that you're experiencing. And it's going to be extremely counterintuitive for you with the sort of setup that you have. But it's really that she needs to be able to have that experience that she just had, and more of them. And they need to be validated first. Just, I see how upset you are, and it's okay. You're experiencing this, going back to that intimacy piece. Intimacy is not about fixing or changing. It's what are you experiencing? It doesn't matter if it's rational. It doesn't matter if it's logical. This is relational. Relational consciousness is what we're trying to bring online here. And it means attuning to your partner, regardless of whether or not their experience fits with your paradigm of what's right or true. It takes a real leap. And unfortunately, we're not trained or taught how to do this. We're socialized how to be individuals, typically, in many societies. Not all, but many. And the one that I come from, my experience is that individualism trumps everything, and how I come across and what my needs are, and that all comes first. And it's very difficult for me to then shift gears and tune into my partner, especially when their experience feels incongruent with my social programming or my ideas about what's true or right. And that's what it seems like you're bumping up against here.
How do you navigate the, my internal dialogue of just, can we speed this up? Can we, have I got to sit with you crying for as long as you want to cry? What if it's all night?
Good question. So recognize that as a fear.
Yeah.
Recognize it as a story. No one is going to just cry all night. I mean, people can cry for a really long time. I don't want to negate that, and I don't want to problematize that. But what I want to do is make a difference, make space between the fear and what's happening in the moment, so that you can actually be present to what's going on. First, what I want you to explore is, how can I just be okay with her crying for 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Can you just start to expand your threshold a little bit, even in small ways, to not, I don't want your first reaction to be, got to contain this, this is not okay, for your sake. Because what you're naming, actually, I think if we explore it a little bit more, potentially would expose sort of your discomfort, and like, I need this to stop because I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And then that starts to reinforce the story for her on a deeper level. I'm a problem. I'm putting you through something.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to untrain that to create real intimacy. Again, intimacy is not easy. It can be very difficult, very uncomfortable. We say, oh, I love intimacy, I want more intimacy. This is sort of that push comes to shove moment. Are you willing to change your own sort of responses, or better yet, reactions to someone else's intensity, to actually cultivate it? And that's not to say you don't have intimacy, beautiful intimacy in other parts of your relationship. We're just really talking about conflict, where people have the least amount of training and self-awareness often, unfortunately.
So being with emotion like that, like crying, is it the same as being with it if we were shouting? If Kel was shouting, is it me working towards being more comfortable with just being with that?
As long as she's not attacking you.
Okay.
And that's hard to do for people who are agitated and elevated. I don't know a ton of people that can do it, but they can, because they've learned how to do it. It's not something that people are sort of come out of the womb knowing how to do, but it's something that we can learn, right? And so that would be an area of growth for Kelly, is how to actually own and be comfortable with her anger. Because she'll have to be comfortable with her own anger and not problematize it as well. Say, I'm really angry. To be able to name your anger, say, I'm really angry, I'm furious. I'm furious at you. I don't like what you did. But you're not saying you're stupid, you shouldn't have done this, you don't care about me. That's crossing the line. But to say, I'm angry and I'm angry at you, is clean. That's okay. And we need to be able to handle that. That's an adult relationship, in my view, is we need to be able to hear people say, I'm angry at you, I didn't like what you did, I want it to be different. Okay, I hear that. I hear why you're angry. It makes sense to me why you're angry. Thank you for explaining to me. What do you need from me, so that we can repair or work on changing this dynamic? That's sort of the way we want to meet their intensity, is come strong, self-possessed. Like, okay, yeah, it's hard to hear. You can even name your own, I'm really overwhelmed by your anger right now. wow, it's intense. It's intense to hear. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's scary to see you get this angry, but it's okay. And that's mine to deal with. My overwhelm with your upset is mine. In the same way that their upset or their intensity is theirs. So we're really creating some differentiation in terms of our nervous system and our capacity to be with the other person's experience. It's sort of asking us to increase our nervous system's toolkits. Like, what am I capable of doing? Enduring, being present to. And you're almost desensitizing yourself to something that, as long as it's clean and fair, to something it's not used to being subject to, or being with, rather. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tricky.
It's very tricky. It takes a lot of practice. And this is just an opening of a possibility. This session is not about changing the pattern. This is about opening a possibility so that you get to see it in real time and feel what it's like. And that your nervous system gets the glimmer of, this is possible to do differently.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think the sitting with emotion is the challenging bit. Certainly with me, would be challenging.
Absolutely. And so part of what I want to
My
invite
stuff.
you to, part of what I want to invite you to do is start working on the narrative. How do you create a counter story to the narrative that emotions are problematic, or whatever your story is? How do you start to invite in a new narrative about emotion? What story do you want to tell yourself about emotion based on what you're learning here?
Yeah.
Because you've seen the result of what you've done, right? You just really very articulately named to me what your impulse was to do. In that, right? You did that, and you know what the result of that is.
There's a feeling of, unless it's contained, it's going to get out of control. And then that becomes really scary for me. So using the cafe example, once voices are raised, voices can go up even higher, or, once everyone looks around, once one person looks around, everyone can look around. Or
Absolutely.
once Kel starts crying, then she might start screaming.
So what you could do is, so I want to give you some tools. And so this is going to be part of that strategy of how to hold space for her experience. You can say, I would really want to continue this conversation. What you're saying is important. I see that this is bringing up some really big stuff for you. I don't feel safe doing this here. I don't feel safe doing this now. I want to create this space for you to have your experience, but can we do it in a place where all feel safe? If she gets to a place where her intensity is overwhelming for you and scary and too much for you to stay present, you can say, hey, there's nothing wrong with your experience. Again, as long as the language is clean, there's nothing wrong with the intensity of your experience. I'm just feeling overwhelmed. I just need to walk around the room, walk out of the room, do some push-ups, get a drink of water. I need to take care of myself for a moment so that I can calm down and be able to continue to hold space for you. Right? So you can take care of yourself. You don't have to just be subject to the fear and the overwhelm. I want to empower you to make requests so that you're taking care of yourself in the context of the conflict. You have to be comfortable stopping and interrupting, and she has to be okay with you stopping and interrupting, as long as you're not problematizing her experience. That's the line.
Okay.
Kelly, as you hear me talking to Adam about these things, about these strategies and this way of sort of approaching, holding your emotional intensity, what's your experience of that? What's coming up for you?
It feels really safe here. Feel like I can I can feel, even if I couldn't see Adam's face, I hear his cogs turning, and I can feel how much he really wants to try. Like, it feels really innocent. Doesn't feel so violent. And yeah, it feels like, just feels really soft. And you know, some of your language, and when you say paradigm, it makes me smile, because Adam, sometimes if I'm trying to explain something, he'd be like, you know, I don't understand those words, but, or bring in relational, online. I just have so many memories of over the years when this stuff was new to me, and then I shared bits with you, but he's taken bits that he's wanted, and he's really tried. And like I said, it goes, I just feel like it so much like gratitude, because it just feels so innocent. Like, we don't know this stuff. Like, we don't, and even if you do know it, you have to practice it with each other. It's not, so yeah, it just feels really nice.
Great. Okay, so
Yeah.
what I'm wanting your nervous system, Adam, to hear is how she's responding. Like, we're talking about the possibility of creating this context for her emotional experience, and she's naming, this feels good, this feels safe. I really want that. I want you to anchor that in. And potentially those words are going to be useful as you start to rebuild a new narrative around emotions and what emotional experience can be, right? What we want to create as a couple is safety. We want our conversations to feel good.
How when I think of emotion, I think of not being in control, and when I think of not being in control, that feels unsafe. So how do you am I reframing emotions as, you know, you're in control? That's the bit that sort of doesn't flow for me. When somebody's highly emotional, I go, they're not in control.
Right.
And if they're not in control, then it feels very unsafe for anybody around them.
Well, don't make that claim for everybody.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Stay grounded in your own experience.
Yeah,
And you've done that really well up to this point. Like, this is scary for me. That's beautiful. Like, for you to name that is very, very powerful. So to name that in the moment, like these tools that I'm giving you to sort of interject, to start to relate to her when she's activated, are going to help you get control of your experience, because it's not about controlling her. Again, if she starts stepping over lines, you need to be like, hey, what you're saying is valid, or I want to be able to hear you and understand you, but when you speak for me, or I feel like I'm being attacked, I can't hear you, or this is going too far in terms of what you're saying, right? So you can modify her language to keep yourself safe, and you can take yourself in and out of relating to her to the degree that you feel safe. You just have to name it. That's what you're doing. You don't just walk away. You say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling scared. Then you're taking responsibility for your emotions, for your internal experience. And then you're doing what you need to for yourself. So it's really not about controlling her. It's about controlling you and having control, knowing that you can trust yourself in the face of that intensity and do what you need to for yourself. You can advocate, you can relate to it. And if you're naming what you're doing and sharing your experience with her without problematizing her or shutting her down, what I think you're going to find is it doesn't escalate, it actually starts to de-escalate faster and faster. The more you allow it and don't problematize it, the faster it dissipates, because the emotions are always there. They're always looking for their place of expression. When they've been suppressed for long enough, they just start to mount and become pressurized. And then when they get into conflict, it feels like they've got their opening, and then they just go for it. But if you're not feeding it with resistance, and you're allowing it to happen, you'll be amazed at how it actually subsides. And that's the way to control it, is by controlling yourself and allowing it to happen for the other person.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
When so I can hear like all those things you're saying, the steps, and seeing some like scenarios. When David was saying like, I want to hear you, and not now, or can we not do it here, or can I have a walk around? For me, instantly I just felt calmer, thinking, because that, for me, I really get that it's either inappropriate or just too much. Like, plain fact, it's just too much. There's just no need for me wanting to spill at that time, or maybe we're in the car, and you're just not, for example, you're just not available for in that moment. For me, you'll be like shutting it down. That's how it feels for me. You want to push it away, shut it down, which then I'm like, but I will shut it down. But if you did say to me, not now, or name what you needed, it'll just go off. It's a fire alarm test.
That's okay.
Or like, I want to get a glass of water. It actually feels like you're controlling it, but not pushing it away. You're controlling and containing what you need.
And that wouldn't feel like I was shutting it down.
No, not at all. Like, there was a few statements that David used. I just remembered water, and I'm going to go for a walk right now. It actually felt held, and like you were advocating for what you needed. So it wasn't like you were pushing me away or yourself. You were just managing the whole situation powerfully. And for me, I instantly felt calmer. Thinking of you even doing that, which you have over the, when the last example I gave about how you used to be trying to help me, but telling me and talking down to me, versus when I'm stressed over an application form for a job, like you'll sit at my level, you feel me first, so that you are like that. And then it's just an opening, and I can just get creative or do things the way I do it. So it feels to me right in this moment, it feels like I do feel better when you are taking care of you, because I actually don't want to spill out everywhere. I need you to like work with me on it, like the budgets, bit of you, bit of me, and then work together on it.
Let me add one more piece that may help start to structure an agreement between you, and it's consent. One thing that happens when couples are together for a long time is we forget about treating each other as autonomous individuals and really giving each other the right to consent to getting into a particular kind of conversation or process. And so this is sort of a way to start thinking about control in a new way that's more collaborative, right? Is you have the right, Adam, to consent to a potentially challenging conversation. And so if you're not ready or in the right space, and you can communicate that in a way that's loving, it can be firm, but it still needs to be loving and respectful. You're not intolerant or agitated or frustrated, but just, hey, this won't work for me right now because I'm not in the space to be with you in it. Can we do it 20 minutes, tomorrow, 2 days, whatever it is? Can we do this in a different moment, in a different space? Then you're getting consent. And the other partner has to really hear that, though, right? If Kelly gets that from you, then you're right. She does have to say, okay, he's letting me know he's not available. Now I need to respect that and wait for when that actually works for both of you. The trick about that then is the person who says, I'm not available, has to come back around, has to say, hey, you were wanting to talk about this, and we said we were going to do it at X, Y, or Z time. You need to be the one that's following up on that and not make the partner who made the request chase after you to have that process. Right? So that they don't feel like they were actually just dismissed and put off. And so that's really important, is that if you say, I can't do it now, let's do it whenever, you need to be the one that, hey, it's that whenever. You ready to have that conversation?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand that.
Great.
Okay.
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 So let's sort of use that as the basis of kind of an emergent agreement between the two of you around conflict. Check in about consent. Are you in a space to have a conversation about money? Yes or no? If not, when? I'll follow up with you on it.
Yeah.
And then if the other one is not in agreement, that's just tough.
In what sense? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not okay to have this conversation now. Well, I want the conversation now. Is that okay?
You can be disappointed, but you can't keep pushing to try to make that happen. If you make this agreement, and this is the point, it's an agreement between the two of you. If someone is asking for something difficult, a challenging conversation, and you receive a no, you have to accept that no.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the agreement. And so if you make that agreement, then you can say, hey, remember the agreement. This is feeling like you're sort of pushing past the agreement. This is making it hard for me to hold space for you.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to trust our agreements if you keep pushing through this. Obviously, unless it's emergency, some things can't wait. But if they can, then this is applicable.
Okay.
Cool. So what we've got so far is a real beginning of a paradigm shift around how to start narrating what to do when, Kelly, you're feeling activated, triggered, having a big emotion to something. Adam, you're getting a firsthand experience of what it's like to start doing something different, to allow it, and to feel empowered enough to do whatever you need to for yourself to keep staying present. And so if you do go take a walk or get some water, do some push-ups, you go, but then you come back.
Yeah.
You don't just disappear and you say what you're going to do. Then you come back to the space and then you keep going. That's also going to give Kelly a chance to regulate and calm down. But again, the really important piece is that she's not feeling like it was a problem or wrong or bad that she got intense. That's the real key to changing the dynamic so that she's not continuing with the story that I'm a problem or that my experience is bad or doing something to him. You're not doing anything to him. You're not hurting him and you're not responsible for him. And both of you need to be able to hold that.
Yeah.
And this is sort of creating a container for that possibility.
So being responsible yourself is seems to be the biggie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what all this is built on.
Yeah. Okay.
But it also doesn't negate that you can support each other in taking responsibility for ourselves as individuals. Like you can mutually help each other regulate when you feel safe enough to do that and clear about how to do that. We're not really focused on that in this moment right now. It's just like, how do you allow her experience? How does she take responsibility for it without making it a problem? And how do you take responsibility for your experience in relationship to that intensity without making it a problem? That's what we're working on right now. But you can build up to the point where you're like, what do you need? Like when you feel safe enough to like lean in to her upset, not by changing it or saying, I need this to stop or fix it, but hey, is there anything you need from me? What can I get for you? Is there a want or a need here that I can help facilitate or just create more space for? It's sort of another step forward once you've gotten through this first threshold.
Yeah.
Or she can ask you, like, let's say she's been really intense for a moment or moments, and you've been holding some good space. And she's like, is there anything you need now that you've been really feeling my intensity and holding space for it? Is there anything you need from me right now?
I feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got about 25 minutes. Like I said, it goes by quick.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do is shift gears and give
Okay.
Adam a chance to talk about the same thing, about money and what it's like. And so now you're holding the space as listener, Kelly, and Adam gets to talk. And again, this isn't about having a complete process. Like, we're just opening up to some of the deeper dynamics that are at work here. So I don't want you to feel like we derailed the process in any way. This was perfect. And it gave you what you need for now. But I want you to have this experience, Adam, of talking about your experience and hearing her just hear you and reflect back.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel
Kelly, let me get you to come back into the frame.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Adam.
Around our finances, I feel that if things are going to change, it's going to be through, almost like my will, my push. I don't feel any external, I don't feel any external push or drive forward. So I feel if there's movement forward, it's because I'm the one moving. That's how it feels.
If I can repeat back. So what I heard is that you feel that if there's going to be any movement on our financial position at all, it's going to come from your will, your push, your drive. Yeah, it's like it's all like it's all going to come from you.
So check in and see if you got it all.
Yeah, you got it. I'm just trying to be with how I actually feel about it.
Yeah.
So, but I want to make sure Kelly gets practice asking, did I get it? Did I miss anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I miss anything?
No, you got it. Yeah, you got it. I feel that there's sometimes there's that you miss the big stuff for the sake of little stuff. That's how I feel. So you said about budgeting. So I feel, well, we can do an Excel spreadsheet, but what really needs to happen is there needs to be a significant change, not an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, stop there. Kelly, what was that like for you to hear? I feel like you missed the big stuff. How was that to receive?
At the same time, so it's two things at the same time. One was a tiny bit of defense. I wanted to go, if I can get the foundation, I can do the big stuff, but that was fleeting. That's like familiar, but a softened defense. But what I can really feel is like I really can understand why Adam would be like, never mind about that. Like, you're missing the point. Like, we need more income. So yeah, interesting. I don't feel like hardly any defensiveness around that. In this moment, I don't know, it's like I can see from his point of view why it's kind of like bonkers.
Okay,
Like,
perfect.
I really can.
Great. So what I'm doing is wanting to see what her experience is to a potentially triggering statement. And so this is going back to the use of language and the communication skill part. It's very deceptive and deceiving to use, and we're not trying to be deceptive or deceiving when we say, I feel that. Because it sort of sounds like, okay, I'm taking ownership, but then it's like, but this is really what you're saying. This is what I'm holding. This is sort of the truth of it for me. So we want to clean it up and create even more distance between what we're naming and our ownership, that this is really our perception of what's happening. Again, you may be absolutely right. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about recognizing that we might be wrong and we don't always know what's going on. And we're trying to step into a collaborative process. So in a situation like that, you want to say, sometimes I have the story that, or I struggle with the idea that, or I have the fear or concern that you miss the big picture for the small stuff. It can sound trivial. It can sound like, oh, you're splitting hairs semantically. And yet, especially when nervous systems are agitated, this semantic change can make a big difference to people's subconscious in terms of whether or not they feel attacked or blamed or judged or whatever we're naming. This is how we take a deeper step into ownership of our subjectivity, which we want to do as much as we can when we're in conflict, because nervous systems don't care about objectivity and subjectivity, right? The feeling starts to take over. So we want to minimize the potential that someone is going to be primed to be defensive as much as possible. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
So in this case, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a detonator for Kelly. I just wanted to check, but it could have been.
Yeah. So the story I have is that it's like 80% of your time is spent, will almost have like 20% impact on our finances. And the story I have is that the 20% of things that could have a big impact, you don't spend any time on, or there's no drive to move them forward. So that leaves me with that feeling of resignation, that, well, the stuff you're working on is not really going to make any difference, because stuff I think you could be working on that would make a big difference doesn't really get worked on. That's the story. That's the story anyway.
So what I heard you say was that you hold a story that 80% of my time, 80% of the things I spend my time on, I think you said it gives
like that 20% 80-20 rule.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how I understood it. So basically 80% of my time and what I do is not creating anything towards what we really want to work on. And that if I did focus just 20% on the main things, that would have an impact. Did I get that correct?
No, I don't mean that won't have any impact. I just mean that the amount of energy you put into a lot of the stuff, it will never have a big impact. It's not that it doesn't have anything, it won't have a big impact. And then the stuff that I feel could have a big impact on our future, you spend hardly any time on.
Yes, okay. I'll try that again then. So the story you hold is that 80% of the things I put all my energy into don't create much impact. Again, what it feels like for me is you're saying that if I did focus 20% of my time on really what we needed, it would make a difference. Did I?
Yeah.
Is there anything else on that you want to say? Anything else?
No, well, just that I feel it. Yeah, if you put a little bit more energy into certain things, I think it would have a big impact on us.
Okay, so if I just put a little bit more energy into those things, it would really have a big impact.
Yeah,
I feel that.
Yeah.
And anything else you want to say on that bit?
No.
Understand.
Perfect. Let's take it a step further now. Let's incorporate the next piece of the puzzle, which is being able as the speaker to ask clarifying questions or engage what you're hearing the speaker say, right? We didn't get to that the first round, but now I want to just have a little taste of it so that you get to see it in action, so that you know that this is ultimately part of a process that gets you dialoguing, not
Okay.
just repeating back what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Right? You are in, yeah. So if there's questions, ideally you have questions about, okay, what are those things, or what do you see, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great. So of the two things that you mentioned, the first one's saying that sometimes you hold a story, that I focus on the smaller things rather than, and because of that, I miss the bigger things. Yeah.
Not miss the bigger things, no.
Yeah. Okay.
That you spend a lot of time on things that I don't feel are ever going to have a big impact on our financial future.
Okay. Yeah. If I can just go back, the first point that you expressed was around me focusing on smaller things, and two statements. It was about me focusing on smaller things and missing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can just focus on that one first. Can you clarify for me? Like, I'm curious, like what are bigger things for you? Like what or smaller? Can you give me an example?
Smaller to me would be writing down where we spend our money, versus bringing in money. So a financial contribution as a big thing, compared to I'm going to spend this hour looking at our bills.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I do understand there's value in it. I just it doesn't marry up to me.
Okay. What I heard you say then was, you broke down what the bigger in your perspective is, what the bigger is, bigger things, and the smaller. So the smaller being, looking at the budgets in detail, writing it down, looking at bills, rather than focusing my attention and energy on making the money. Yes, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that bit?
No.
And is there anything else when you talk about the bigger things, like the making money piece? Is there anything else that would go into the bigger, more important things?
No, it's more just being in action around stuff that has an impact, rather than moving our papers around, which we both do.
So what I heard you say then was that, again, for you, the more important things that would make an impact are the inaction around making money, rather than, like looking at what is like papers and pushing things around. I get that. Yeah. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. And then the next question I'd love to ask is, with the 80% and the 20%, is that the same? Do you mean, like, can you explain a little bit more about what the activities of the 80% are, and then the 20%? Like, how was that like in your world?
Well, it's not specifically 80-20, but for example, you had Sam here all day, so you worked all day and all night with her till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
On something in my world that will only ever generate something minute, if anything ever.
Yeah.
And the job application is done in 5 minutes. And in my world, I would have thought that perhaps you could, I don't know, that if the amount of energy had been switched, then you probably would have had a job or an outcome that is going to make a difference to us. So just they just don't add up. My story is that you have your passion projects. My story is there's a belief that the things that you love doing will have as big an effect as getting a job. Does that make sense?
Could you say that again?
It's like my story is that the things that you're hugely passionate about, you believe that spending time in those areas will have as much of a financial effect as spending time in an area that is very transactional. Someone will actually pay you for doing something.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, I think so. If I can say it back. So the story you're holding is that I believe that the energy, time, the effort that I put into my passion projects is somehow going to have the same effect or impact as me doing a job. Yeah, but it's not. It's like,
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that bit? Okay.
Perfect.
No.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
More for time than anything else. Adam, I want to understand or hear about your experience of just what's it like to just have her asking these questions, sort of inquiring about what your perception is in this way. What's it like for you?
I felt a little bit nervous to start with. I felt a little bit unsafe bringing these type of discussions up. But then as you paraphrase back to me in a calm manner, it felt calm. And I felt that I was being heard, and I felt that it wasn't from an emotional. It didn't feel like there was any charge, which meant that there was no charge for me either. And that's why I was sort of almost then questioning what I was saying. I was almost down an internal dialogue in terms of, is this right what I believe? Whereas I think if Kel had come back with then I wouldn't have had any space to believe that, and I would have just stuck with my belief.
So you're saying because you were able to have some space around sort of your own internal relationship to the belief or the declaration you're making, there's able to create a new kind of relationship to it.
As soon as I was able to calmly narrate it, it perhaps wasn't making as much sense as I thought it was.
So it created some space for even auto reflection, like is this what I believe? Is this what I mean?
Yeah.
Is this what's most important?
Yeah, it was because it was like pushing a door open. There was nothing on the other side.
So it sounded like it was a positive experience.
It's very positive, yeah.
Okay, and it's great to hear you. Great to hear you name safety.
Yeah, felt safe. Am I still safe? As soon as you guys go, I'm not sure how safe I'm going to be.
Right, as soon as the camera's off. But that was fantastic, and so you can see how it's very staccato. It's very repetitive. It's very rigid. As you get used to this and start internalizing this and integrating this into your communication pattern, you can start to loosen in terms of, you don't have to, did I get everything, say everything back? Like, you can start to just ease into a way of doing it more fluidly, a little more spontaneously. Sometimes you don't repeat everything right back. It's more just, oh, if you feel like you're getting off the rails, like the partner feels like, oh, I'm not sure you actually heard me. Could you repeat back what I said just to make sure that I know that you know what I said, right? So this is a template, and it has to be rigid at first until you start to get used to it and integrate it. Also, let's say we were going to do another session together. we would start to dive into the nuance of what are these questions? What are the implications of these things that you're hearing for each other? And then do a similar thing like, wow, when I hear you say my passion projects don't or potentially won't amount to anything, or that's your story, that's really hard to hear. And I'm wondering if you're willing to consider X, Y, or Z. You start to nuance the conversation, right? And that's something that you can take and run with these skills. But the trick is to get to that point where you're staying focused on content and not getting lost in the storm of your triggers. And that's really why the structure is so important, and why these tools around keeping yourself feeling safe if emotions do emerge are so important. And so in this case, in this particular dynamic, it's important that Kelly knows that her emotional experience is safe and not problematized and totally okay, and it's going to be held in a positive way by you, Adam, even though it might be challenging for you. And you, Adam, are going to grant that space of non-pathologized experience and take care of yourself and modify it as you need, and really be making sure that there's consent around how those conversations play out. So we're sort of changing the word control and moving over to consent.
Yeah.
And that's how you get your safety, through consent, not so much through control.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, I really want to appreciate both of you so much. Like, you just stepped into this process with so much vulnerability, so much sincerity. It's just really tremendous. And for you to share it with other people who can potentially learn from this and start to sort of bring more of this into the world makes me really happy and inspires me so much. So I really, really want to thank you both for being here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
really
very
so
much. I think that's really well helpful.
Yeah, it's been really, really great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any post-process that you want to share via email or ever want to reach out, definitely, I'd love to hear from you. Definitely feel welcome to do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of the evening, and we'll see you down the road.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
all. Bye.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was amazing. I have so much respect for Adam and Kelly. I hope you relay that to them, that, clearly what they are going through is something that every other human has experienced. And this was a great learning opportunity for all of us. And I also, I'm thinking, wishing once again that these skills were taught in a structured way, starting in childhood. They also apply to all kinds of relationships. You may not need to get that intimate with, someone you're briefly work with, or, but any kind of relationship where intimacy is important to us, this is what we need to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And part of my experience in the restorative justice world was that I was interfacing with institutionalized systems. And so there's a way in which I wasn't able to sort of go to the places I wanted to go to in the work. I felt limited. It was very profound and illuminating. And even within the organization, we were able to have restorative conversations, like sort of inter-organizationally, i.e., along the hierarchy of the employees. And it was powerful to see that instituted and integrated into an organizational system. But as time went on, I could feel myself yearning for sort of a more personal, more vulnerable, more kind of, there's something about working with family and couples that just is so satisfying, because those are the places where we go for refuge. Those are the places where we want to feel safe. Those are the places where we want to feel like we're being taken care of. And when conflict hinders that, it really is such a detrimental impact on our quality of life. And so for me, it's very powerful to work at that level.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know you have offered to stay a little bit longer and answer some questions if the audience has any to share. And audience, you're welcome to turn your cameras on at this point and share your questions. I don't see any questions in chat, but if you have a question or comment, then you want to speak it or put it in chat. We're happy to take them.
Looks like there's a question coming in. How do you help couples identify what's too much and when they need a break somatically? Perfect. So what you didn't see is the initial session. This is one of the reasons why I think I named that at the beginning, we stagger the sessions, is so that I'm able to introduce myself, give them a sense of who I am, what I look like, feel like, all that, sort of ground their experience with me, talk about the protocol, and then start working on some basic self-awareness skill building. Some people come with a lot, some people come with nothing. And so I always have that sort of 1 to 10 scale in terms of trigger awareness. Like, where are you, right? 1 being the most neutral or regulated, self-regulated, 10 being the most dysregulated. And sort of talking about what's it like to become aware of yourself from the 1 to 5. Because after 5, you start getting into the danger zone where you're starting to move down the brainstem, out of the neocortex and more towards the fight or flight responses, right? That make conflict impossible to transform. And so if people start to just tune into that, they have these tools that will sort of get them to track that experience. And so what I do is I say there's 3 ways to do that. Start with your body, what's happening in your physically, what are your physical sensations? Like, where are you feeling sort of tightness in the breath, tightness of breath, tightness in the chest, my shoulders are going up, something like that, some kind of somatic cue. Then I say, what are your feelings? Sadness, anger, rage. And then finally, what are the stories that are attached to those experiences? He doesn't love me. He can't see me. He'll never care. She doesn't think this is important. And so I'm teaching them kind of a 3-pronged approach to looking at where they are in their experience. And any one of those points can have a very powerful effect in terms of interrupting that sort of descent down into the fight or flight response. The very act of tracking your experience can interrupt it and bring you back into the neocortex, which can keep you more resourced. And so I teach that little bit in that first session. And then I'm reminding them throughout, and I'm tracking them, watching them. If I'm seeing something happen that it seems like they're starting to get agitated, but not tracking for themselves, I say, hey, what's going on for you? I'm seeing you do this. I don't know what it means. Can you talk about your experience? And that's also why you had me say at the beginning, before they started, if you get to that 5 or beyond, stop, look at me, raise your hand. And so just training them to start getting more and more explicitly aware of their own experience in the context of a potentially triggering conversation. It's a great question.
I'm going to read this out loud for the recording because they may not, people who watch the recording will not see the chat. It seemed amazing that Kelly didn't seem to feel triggered by the idea of Adam needing a break. Do you have wisdom for the partner who is dysregulated by their partner needing to take a break to regulate?
Absolutely. And so in this case, what I was seeing with Kelly is that she's really, and this is also sort of the benefit of the first session, is I had insight into the fact that she's really just needing her experience to be validated and okay. And we had worked on that. And so that was explicit for me. So I wasn't as surprised by that as it might have seemed more amazing on the surface from this particular session. But in terms of wisdom for partners who may be dysregulated, I think we addressed it in this session, actually, where I talked about having to name that if you are going to disengage, if you do need a break, if you are feeling overwhelmed, that you're saying that explicitly, right? And I was impressed by Adam's vulnerability. Like, he said, I'm scared. This is right? I'm starting to feel self-conscious about where this is happening, or this is going to get out of control. And so being able to name that explicitly is something revolutionary for him that would have never occurred to him potentially outside of the context of this work. And so I'm introducing him to this agency that will allow him to communicate in a way that will give the dysregulated person more feeling of safety, right? He's naming, I'm feeling this. This is my experience. There's nothing wrong with what's going on for you. I just need to regulate myself so that I can come back. So you just have to be really explicit about disengaging. You don't just walk off. You don't just cut and run, which can really send someone's attachment system into a whirl. So also in the context of our session, we're normalizing this is the agreement. And so we're also reinforcing that for the person who may feel dysregulated by someone's absence, even if they're naming it, that this is what we're working on together. This is a collaborative approach. We're narrating that your taking a break is actually protecting the relationship. You caring for you is caring for us, because you know that this is just going to get worse and worse for us if we keep staying in it, even though that may be challenging for me and I have to work on what comes up when you take a break, right? And so we have to give both people the tools and right, or permission rather, to do it, but then keep normalizing as an agreement in the sort of protocol of your conflict transformation process as a relationship. Mm-hmm.
I noticed at the end, Adam mentioned, I felt safe, I feel safe. And then he sort of joked and laughed about, I don't know what's going to happen when we leave this session. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think I don't love that kind of joke in that context, but what I interpreted it as is a release of, like, he just went through a really big process that was really stretched him, and it seemed like he needed to relieve some of that tension through a joke. And so it's fine. I think if I had more time and was in the session, I might have spoke to it more. In this case, I was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna let you get away with that. Go breathe. You just did a lot. Awesome. But if it was something that was like, oh, this is potentially problematic, and I have more time to dig in and explore that, that's something that I would kind of engage with. I like that you caught that, because I was feeling that, that's not.
Also reminded me, of some couples therapy sessions I've been in as a client, and kind of leaving, not knowing where to start conversation with my partner, because we had just gone through something really intense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's something I want to speak to actually for a moment, is integration. How do you integrate? And this is something that I'm constantly trying to, how do I help couples integrate a session? Because so many times you feel like you're leaving them to their own devices after they've gone through something really big. And that's something I haven't figured out, right? Is how do you have a really big experience that's really opened you up to something new, exciting, but also overwhelming? What are ways that I can support clients long term? Obviously, repeated sessions is sort of what I have most available, more readily available, but it's a question for me that stays consistent.
There's another question I'd like to read. Also, you mentioned, in quotation marks, not fusing with the story, but staying with it, which I found very profound. How do you recommend people learning how to do that in an embodied rather than just cognitive way?
That's an awesome question. One of the big influences on my work is narrative therapy and theory. And so that's really focused on the ways that we construct meaning as human beings to really do anything. We are story making animals. It's so fascinating to really study the brain's propensity to story basically any experience doesn't make sense to us unless we put some, even if it's the most basic infrastructure of the story on it, right? That's what we relate to, is the story. So by sort of talking about and framing the way that the mind narrates its experience as stories, we can start to create this experience of that space that I'm naming or was naming in the session, right? And you can start doing that somatically by what are these experiences, sort of going back to what I was talking about with trigger work. What are you feeling right now as you tell this story? When you say to yourself, she doesn't care about our finances, this is never going to change, what do you feel in your body? Can you recognize and start to make the connection between the story and then this physiological response to it? And then also connect the emotion to it. So that three-pronged self-awareness tool that I'm giving people to manage their triggers is really a way to start working into a deeper awareness of the way that the mind works and relates to conflict. Right. And so the story is something that the mind produces in response to past experiences. Then that sends off a cascade of very profound physiological experiences or reactions that you can monitor and observe. And you can see how you're not the story is not the whole reality of what you're experiencing, neither are the physiological sensations, nor the emotions. So you keep nuancing people's ability to look at their own experience more and more. How do you keep creating that meta perspective that allows people to start having choice points around how they relate to their own internal process in conflict? Oh, that's my story. That's why I keep having them say that. This is my story. You start creating more and more and more space from the story. This is not the truth. This is that story, and this really has big impacts on then how I show up.
Another question, I don't want to belabor this, but if someone uses all the right language around the need for a break, but nevertheless are with someone that has no tolerance for allowing their partner to step away in conflict, do you have guidance for how to overcome that impasse?
I'm going to read that one more time to ingest it for myself. In a situation like that, I've seen this happen, and every time that that's happened, there's been pretty significant trauma in the person who doesn't have the tolerance for letting someone else step away. And so we start talking about, I start focusing explicitly on attachment issues and exploring what is a person's relationship to their own attachment style, what is their own trauma history. Sometimes I'll stop sessions like this in a dynamic like this and create a bubble around that potential trauma experience, like start doing something, a system like inner parts work, right? And it'll be interesting, sort of, it'll seem like a very big detour, but will yield very profound results. To be honest, if we hadn't been in the context of this observed session, I would have done that with Kelly, because I was sensing that, oh, this is huge, this is going way back. And that's what the confusion for Adam is how is it getting to this level of intensity so fast, right? And when she's narrating to me explicitly, I'm not doing this right, I'm messing up, and taking on that, like exhibiting that much shame in a process like that, then I'm going to probably want to do some kind of trauma work. So in that case, I'm going to sort of stop the trajectory we're on, focus on the trauma, and then see if what that gives us in terms of more tolerance for being in a process that shifts. Because in that case, it's very challenging. Like if someone will not let the other person cleanly walk away, that can very quickly escalate. And so you have to create this sort of more nuanced process of working with that trauma so that the person can eventually get to that point where they can be okay with self-regulating or self-soothing when a partner is needing to disengage or modify the process. Really good question.
Kelly's experience made me think of some of my own experiences being a person of color who grew up in across the world. and having my culture always be at best kind of a thing of curiosity and interest, and at worst sometimes pathologized, because different styles of communication, different styles of expressing emotion or not expressing emotion, and so I think a lot of that kind of like feeling like you're always annoying other people, or you're always wrong, or you always have to explain yourself but don't get a chance to, that may come into play when you have people from different cultures communicate.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I saw a lot in the workshops around nonviolent communication that I was participating in or running, or even in the context of restorative justice, where facilitators get hung up in sort of trying to create this tone neutral environment. And this is one of the reasons why I've incorporated explicitly that emotional intensity is not a problem. Big feelings and the way of communicating those in their essence is not essentially a problem, because that can be a cultural piece. Like if you're working with, for somebody, for example, someone from an Italian culture, their way of processing is going to be very different than someone from sort of a more emotionally conservative place, right? And so being able to make that distinction is revolutionary for some people. And they're almost, I mean, you could see it in Adam. He was really working hard to grok that. Like, okay, it's okay that she's getting intense. Wow, I really need to, what does that mean for our dynamic? And so that's where you have to be very clear about what's clean language. Again, that's still not 100% objective, but I think at least starts to speak to what you're talking about when people want to sort of project kind of what is clean or safe language, and then sort of fuse that unintentionally or unconsciously with emotional tone and intensity.
Here's another question. Having your story noted and accepted is so important. I noted your use of counter narrative when talking to Adam about his own internal narratives, and see how this whole process is helpful in discovering, experiencing, and working through personal stories, and wondered when, if you have partners provide counter narratives for each other.
Absolutely. And so I'll do that anytime people are naming that what we're talking about doing in terms of like an agreement or a change in the behavior, the communication dynamic that we're working with in the session. If a client is hearing sort of this new recipe for how to do things, and they're saying, that sounds really hard, or that sounds impossible, or that sounds challenging, then definitely we have to work on counter narratives. Or if someone's sort of naming, this is so hard for me, like sort of really emphasizing and repeating the difficulty of doing things differently, then we'll bring in the counter narrative. This is something also that comes from narrative therapy. This is not my invention. This is giving someone a tool to sort of, how do you, if you're left with just negating the story, you're sort of left with a vacuum. And so you need something that you're then reinforcing, like, what's the new direction that my mind's going to go in? What is the thing that I'm now going to say, this is the belief, or this is where my energy is going to go? In this case, I could see that with Adam, where he was talking about control. Control is not the word I wanted to leave him with. And so it was really potent to see him work towards consent. And at the end, he was really made that link. And I wanted to reinforce that. I said, that's why we're changing control narrative to the consent narrative for you to get safety, because that then empowers you and allows your partner to continue to have her experience. And so the mind has to have sort of its substitute. It can't just be left often with a vacuum where you just sort of, then you're sort of like, just, okay, that's not true. That's, I can't believe that. It's much more efficient, or effective rather, to have something, okay, where am I going to sort of send that energy towards?
Okay. So, and one more question. It seems like you wouldn't want to throw the story out completely, but own it. Otherwise, it could potentially grow stronger through the resistance.
Absolutely. You don't want to negate again, I don't want to negate anyone's experience. I want to bring it to the level of consciousness, create space for it, and then see what are the needs and wants underneath. What is the story trying to get for us? Like, the story has a purpose. The story is trying to get us a need or want fulfilled. That's my belief, right? And that is very much informed from a system like nonviolent communication. There's a reason for the story. Stories don't just come from nowhere typically. And so, yes, giving it its space, deconstructing it, looking at it, figuring out what it needs, but not sort of fully identifying with it at the same time. And it's a delicate balance, but a skill that we can learn. It's powerful when people start to integrate it. And it was great to see that starting to happen in this session immediately.
Maybe one last one. Good thoughts. I love the consent control switch. I understand not negating people's experiences, but what about diffusing counter narratives to the problematic internal narratives of your partner? Like, if Kelly's narrative is that Adam would be happier without her, it's so important for him to know that, and for her to know that he hears it. But a small part of me felt like it's not totally complete without letting him offer his thoughts and feelings about it, if he disagrees.
Yeah, and ideally that's the place where you get to, sort of, that I was naming at the end. Like, once you have the time and space to get used to this and integrate this into your conversations with your partners, you get into more of a back and forth. Like, this process slowed down because of Kelly's big reaction, which was fantastic. It was exactly what needed to happen. I'm glad she felt safe enough to have that experience and that we really got to zero in on it. But kind of what you saw towards the end, as you get to explore and inquiry, what's that like for you? What's it like for you to hear me say X, Y, or Z? What's it like for you to hear me say, you'd be happier without me, or I'm the one holding you back from getting the life you want? And so I don't want them to fall into the trap of him just negating her story. No, that's not true. I want her to hear, what's it like for him to hear that, so that it stays her story and she gets to be the one that's working with it, not him trying to fix or change it. I want them to have that agency in terms of their own relationship to their stories and see the impact of that. What's it like to hold that story on you, your relationship, and the partner? Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. And thanks for our participants.
Yeah, thank you all for these questions. Really great questions. So cool to see people engage this way with the work. Thank you.
Well, have a great rest of your day, everyone. And join our mailing list so you know about everything we do. Come back.
Great. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.